People that think that brainwashing is something that they do once successfully and then it remains that way for the rest of the person's life, that's not true. The programming tactics have to be repeated over time. An individual that exits the community or escapes the community, because those are the two ways that people leave if they ever leave. It is just like somebody taking a bath or shower. It doesn't last forever. You have to repeat it. So somebody who gets distance from a cult may never come to the full conclusions of what it was, but the programming that was done to them there is not going to have the same hold forever unless they're returning to retreats and the things that they do on the outside, which is another reason why they established that with the parents. This is common in cults. The American houses are more mild. Things have obviously worsened over the last 15 years. I'm going to address a different topic that Paul is facing now that he has come forward publicly. This is a threat. This is a risk. This is the next phase of what they will do if they can't control their quote-unquote members, but really what we are slaves. If they cannot control us and keep us within Cenacolo's boundaries, in their control, well, then they have your family most likely, they have your friends most likely, because they will manipulate relationships and put them together for you so that you have people to lose. It's not to help you to have somebody for the reason that you should have other people in your life. What they do to make sure that if you have escaped like I have, or if you exited like Paul did from an American house, I want people to understand what we face and what we go through. Most who've been following know it's not like I had a decent family background of any kind. The reason that I got in was the tie to Eitenauer, who was part of the whole thing, as much as they try to keep that low key, like he's not part of it. He's part of it. One thing that you do in this cult, which is exactly what people will do in prison as well, is you bond with other inmates. You bond with other members there. You're going to do that as a survival. And when you do start to form friendships, they will control those. So they will make it so that you can never be around that person if you make a friendship with them, because they don't want you being friends with anybody who is not entirely controlled by them. Period. They can't physically hold somebody against their will, at least that I know of. In America, I don't think they're doing that. Manipulate the American overseas? Yes, absolutely. But they are holding Americans against their will overseas. And what they are doing here is still a cult. It is still dangerous. What they've done is they formed a gateway. In Florida, of course, of all states, they use to move Americans in and out and move people from other countries in. So after I escaped, months after, I began to look into the psychological side of things. And I got into therapy. I said I had a Catholic psychologist for like 3 years. That was my first therapist. She's a doctor of psychology. I've recommended that I go to this intensive outpatient for the PTSD and for a full comprehensive evaluation. They have a team of psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, all different levels of professionals that come together to do a comprehensive evaluation on a person that clearly has severe PTSD or potential personality disorder, things like that. I was trying to get into this place on the recommendation of my Catholic psychologist. They're swimming in the billions and they're saying they're using this for the people. They will not fly somebody who doesn't have the money to one of their houses to enter the community. They won't fly you home. They won't do anything to help you because they're keeping that money for them. If you think money that's donated is going in to help people travel, I didn't have family ever showing up or anything like that. I have mentioned before that I went to one of the parents' retreats. A girl I lived in the house with over in France, and she was newer. And these parents were just desperate to know information about her, to hear about her, how she was doing. And of course, everything that they do at these parent retreats is emotionally manipulated by fear-mongering to keeping their family members who are trying to escape or get out in this cult. Remember, the first thing they did when they had everybody gathered at this parent retreat was walk in with a picture of a young man that they walked up this aisle, had everybody look at, and then they go on, talk to the parents about how this man is dead. A young man who was addicted to drugs, I think it was heroin, but it doesn't really matter. He was addicted to drugs. He was going to be entering, I think in a matter of like 2 weeks. And 2 weeks before it was time, he had done like the colloquy, he'd done, well, as Paul says, and a lot of the stuff, I don't know how they call it in English, because when I'm talking about Cenacolo, everything comes to me in Italian, and it makes me stumble over languages, and it's trying to make me switch languages while I'm speaking. So come in for 2 weeks orientation, see what it's like, but it's not even what it's like. It's not, and that's the thing, because it's to reel you in. Like Paul and I both said, it's a facade. So they start to go on about how this young man is dead 2 weeks from entering Cenacolo, which I don't know how in any way, shape, or form that gives any sort of credit to Cenacolo. He never was in your cult, yet you choose him of all people to try to support your cult. So this man wasn't programmed, he wasn't brainwashed, he never had to go into this cult, but he did unfortunately die of an overdose beforehand. And that's what they have to go with. Okay, so there was somebody who was going to enter, but died before. Yes, addiction does that. People drop dead like flies every day of addiction. It doesn't mean you're not a cult, and it doesn't mean you're helping people. And they have these poor parents there. And those parents like show up they were showing up like at every retreat to tell other parents, keep your kids in here, we wish we had. And I just want to say my condolences to the parents who lost this specific son. It's horrific. But you do not know what Cenacolo is. Your son never spent time in Cenacolo. But you're allowing these people to use his story when they had nothing to do with his story. But I understand that you're grieving parents, and I do not judge you in any way, shape, or form for allowing them to use your son's picture and your son's story to justify what they're doing. So I'm at this retreat. I meet her parents. You can just tell they're just starved for any piece of information because they won't give it. They make you like that desperate. You got to show up at these retreats to get any information. They eventually moved this girl to the first girls' American house that they opened, but she was overseas at the time. I spent, like I said, these 3 or 4 days with them, and I was able to tell them all about her friendship and her time over there and how she was doing and all these other things. And this was at a point when I hadn't gotten therapy yet. I hadn't been distanced enough from this cult to be able to acknowledge or face the fullness of what happened and exactly what it was, which is again common. I have mentioned that I was not exempt from this programming. I would come in and out of it. I can attest to the fact that you come in and out of it. There were certain times it had me more. I spent this time with them, and it started a relationship, and they just started calling me their daughter. We were both their daughters now, all right? And they knew I didn't have home life or a decent family or anything like that. So these people were like parents to me. And Albino and Joyce knew, all right? They knew that I didn't have that. This is how manipulative these people are. They arrange it so that I'm with these parents, and now I have this family. And one of my best friends is now like a sister to me. And after I had gotten out of the cult officially, after the escape on foot overseas, the ordeal with the receptionist and the police and Don Stefano and the documents and all of that, I'm going to get into more detail step by step about all of that. Once I was in therapy and they found out I was in therapy, they found out I was seeing a psychologist, even though it was a Catholic psychologist, and they found out I was going to be going into this intensive. When word got out that Danielle was going into a facility that was not Cenacolo for treatment, this is what happened. They enacted one of their biggest weapons that they have to use against people who leave and try to speak out or try to take another way. They contact their entire network of parents. First and foremost, these parents I was speaking about who adopted me into their family. They immediately ordered every single parent that had any contact with me, anybody on the outside who had any contact with me, to immediately shun me because I was getting therapy as an adult in my own country, because I was choosing a different way. And because this is a cult, these people who otherwise would be reasonable, who would never react in a way like this, immediately cut me off. Never heard from them again. The only thing I got was, we've been told to cut you off by Albino and Joyce because you're going into this other treatment center. Again, this is months after I escaped Cenacolo. I'd already spent nearly 3 years there. I thought for sure, I remember thinking in my mind, there's no way she's not going to answer. There's no way she's not going to talk to me. No, they had her. You know, when she entered, she was one of the people that I probably would have thought would never get taken by the programming. If there was ever anybody who would resist it and ever anybody who wouldn't get taken by it, it would have been her. That is how she showed up. And she's an amazing person. I do not hold this against her. I do not hold resentment towards her. I know this is not her fault. I don't hold resentment towards the parents. I know this is not their fault. I'm not saying there's no responsibility in acknowledging and coming to, but I don't judge them because I know what this is, and I know what Albino and Joyce have done. Overnight, I lose yet another family that I finally had. Because I was seeking psychological treatment outside of Cenacolo at like 22 years old. I called her and she never picked up again. That's Cenacolo for you. This is their safety net. This is their last resort. You want to speak against us, or you want to do something against what we say is the only way for you to be free, the only way for you to be better, the only way you're not going to die and live a horrible life is to do as Albino and Joyce say, as Arena says, as Don Stefano says, as any of them say. Then they make sure you have people to lose that they can rip away from you just like that. That's what we face after we come out.
When they back against the wall, so they just start shooting. For red or for blue or for blow, I get from Bankhead up to your project. No more stress, now I'm straight. Now I get it, now I take time to think before I make mistakes, just for my family's sake. That part of me left yesterday, the heart of me is strong today. No regrets, I'm blessed to say the old me dead and gone away.
I've been traveling